So for my next recommendation, going back to the past, a series that aired back in 2002,
Mm-hmm.
called Magical Shopping Arcade Abenobashi, or Abenobashi Maho Shotengai. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually a series that was produced by Gainax, um,
Ooh.
and it's one that's forgotten and usually not talked about because it's, again, one of their earlier and weirder sorts of stories. The overall plot revolves around two children, so we're following some kind of theme here. Childhood
Mm-hmm.
friends, Sashi and Arumi, and they both live in the titular Abenobashi, which is a commercial district that's set outside of Osaka. An accident occurs where Sashi's grandfather is injured trying to go after a cat, and he learns that both his best friend Arumi is going to be moving away soon, and then also the commercial district or the shopping district is going to be shut down. And it's set, obviously, early 2000s, so this is during the beginnings of what was ultimately Japan's financial downturn. As a result of this, he and Arumi get pulled into a alternate dimension, which is essentially a Benobashi, but populated by analogs of Sashi's own otaku interests. And so there's all sorts of different worlds, nonsensical versions of the shopping district
Oh.
that they travel as they try to get back to their reality. So you have worlds that are based on, war, science fiction, fantasy, dating sims, and even American movies. And they're all presented in a very surreal way where they meet um, uh, different versions of family members and friends and other characters from the real world, but through this lens. And as you watch the series, what you realize is that while it's framed as a story about trying to get home, in fact, the reason why the pair keep finding themselves in new and weirder versions of the shopping district isn't because there's sort of a rabbit hole they got to follow. It's because Sashi doesn't want to go home because
Ooh.
as sort of laid out in the beginning, everything is changing and there's a lot of trauma. And so the series is really about him growing up and coming to accept all of the many things that change as you transition from being a young person into more of the adult world, and also understanding that places and people will go away and it won't always be pleasant. And so I last watched this maybe 5 or 10, somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago, because I caught it maybe a year after it originally aired. And I
Uh-huh.
noted back then that, like, my feelings about the show and my memories started to melt together. Where I originally remember it being this sort of fun, wacky adventure that had a lot of experimental and interesting animation. And then when I watched it again when I was a little bit older, kind of just out of college, the nostalgia struck me heavy. And I don't mean the nostalgia for going back and watching something older. I mean that nostalgia is actually a big part of the story and the tropes that are played with in the series. And then having reviewed a little bit of it again to talk about today, I felt like the that journey towards adulthood felt a lot more real to me as I became an adult. So it's something that has a lot of layers, and no matter where you're coming at this, it's just super interesting, and a snapshot also of Japanese culture from maybe 15 or 20 years ago. There was also a manga
Hmm.
adaptation that came out, and it's a short series. It's only about 13 episodes, so you can get through it pretty quick.
Oh. Yeah, that's like one day. Oh, that actually sounds really interesting. Let me add that to my list.